Greetings, my friends. Today I am here with a book, just a collection of articles from Feminist Africa, Volume 5, Issue 2, 2024. The title is Rethinking African Feminisms in the New World. So, in the new normal. There are a number of articles in this material, but I will just focus on the two of them, leaving the others for you to read and giving you just highlight into what they cover. The first one, Africa's natural resources amid old and new imperial relations, what implications for gender justice. This one highlights how imperial relations are affecting Africa from the United States and from the South-South relationship like India and China and with Africa. And when you consider it from BRICS angle, the founders of BRICS, Russia, India, and China, how they affect Africa. The Russians have their own private security and military firms that are interacting with Africa for their own mineral gains. So this is one of the areas that affects the continent, be it gender-wise or in other ways. Indians have plantations which affect communities, women who have their own plantations and who are continuously quarreling and being affected right by guards of the plantations and people working there. When we come to China, China has the Belt and Road Initiative, which tries to lay 7,000 kilometers of roads, bridges, and other infrastructure. But the problem with this is it is not meant to benefit Africa, but that of the Chinese themselves, who will be exploiting Africa first when they build it. It is by tying Africa with their difficult date, which would eventually take away our assets, national assets. And they would exploit our mineral resources and other raw materials for their factories. Factory goods would come back and be sold at expensive prices. Last time when I was dealing with neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, I just covered how imperialists exploit our resources and sell us the expensive factory goods while we can't bargain because we don't have alternatives since Africa has been deprived of the facilities to build the political landscape even to build our own factories. So it's an interesting story since the study covers how women have been affected by these imperial relations with Africa, while the corrupted leaders sign difficult, dangerous deals. The next one, the colonial state and post-colonial feminist predicaments. Just colonial states have inherited a number of ideas and deeds from theoretical or practical lessons from the colonial times. So the post-colonial feminism has been influenced by those power relations. So this is the second one by Lynn Osome. Osome. So it's an interesting one because post-colonial states have that bad structural influence from the colonial ones. The next one is domestic workers as instruments of accumulation, unpacking objectifying discourses within Uganda's extraterritorialization of gendered and racialized labor. This is a study of two of the major Rwanda's newspapers. The writer took samples from Uganda's newspapers so that he or she can gain insight into how they portray women. Just objectification of women, considering them like materials to be owned. These domestic workers working in Arab countries, in the Gulf countries, most of the Ugandese go to Saudi Arabia. The government wants them just for their for the money they send for their remittances, $1.3 billion, and they always try to defend any abuses upon these women. When they are abused, they are telling them to be patriotic, to keep quiet. The kafala system in those countries, in the Gulf countries, does not give a good worker relationship to these women because they are viewed not as equal people. They are wanted for their service, and their personal aspect is not really respected. The government calls them like cash cow, and the situation is worse in the Gulf countries. These domestic workers are objectified, and the unemployment rate in the country is high. So to tackle this, the government sends them. It considers it as one means of development. It is even more than the multilateral aid that the Ugandan government gets. So for this reason, it abuses them. The newspapers also try to voice the same ideas which are against the domestic workers. These ideas from the government and the recruiting agencies do not consider the workers' rights. While Filipino workers are paid well, Ugandan workers are paid $240 a month, while they work 15 hours or more a day for 6 days a week. They are considered like property which are bought and sold. It is more or less like slavery. The distinction between labor power and human beings is not really um, there is no gap between this, as human beings are non-commodities and their labor is considered as a commodity, so the distinction between these two is not really laid down. The life they live there is temporary and foreign, so they cannot live there for good. They cannot stay there. They cannot become permanent citizens. While foreign labor is desired, the person who embodies it is rejected. They want your labor, but they don't respect your rights. The dirty, demeaning, dangerous, and difficult work, the 4D, is what they are doing, but what they get back is not really uh, useful as their service is. And they are excluded from protection since the home in these Gulf countries is out of state control. There is no legal protection given for them. Migration is taken as a development strategy by the side of the Ugandan government. They give some training and some awareness, but these do not really help them to a big degree. The newspaper narratives are really bad. Uganda newspaper narratives, they call it labor export, labor externalization. So they sanitize the problem. This is really dangerous. So labor migration is institutionalized and there is no investigative report done to cover. So they may say there is no free lunch. So this is not representative of the entire situation. This is a unique case. So we are dealing with president, uh, the president of the country is also just surrounded by people who support his views and deeds, and there is patronage, and it is a neo patrimonial state. His shadow, the president's shadow, looms large because just it is his policies that the money he gets from the remittance that are his policies that or his interest that is implemented. So as long as he stays in power, he doesn't really care about these people. Newspapers would say this is the same thing is happening in Asia among the Indian population, the South Asians, the East Asians, but the African is really so bad. African governments are not really caring about their citizens according to this study. Just taking the Ugandan example. So they tell them to be patriotic. Domestic workers are uh, told to be patriotic when they complain. So this is a very interesting study. I think the situation is also more or less the same in among other African workers, the housemaids or domestic workers in other African, from going to the Gulf countries from other African countries. The next study, so this one about domestic workers, and the first one about imperial relations and Africa's natural resources. These two I just focused on from this study, but the others are also equally relevant. African feminism as a method, a methodology for African feminism in the digital age. This is interesting because African feminism is different from the feminism of the rest of the world, and the fact that it is in this digital age that African feminism is discussed, a new methodology should come. So this is what the writer of this piece is arguing. The standpoint, feminism in the digital era, challenges and opportunities in Africa. Just this one is the abuses and the challenges, the blackmailing that African ladies or females face in this digital era. So content moderation and all those procedures about that, it is discussed. Centering emission rights, expropriation, and of unpaid women's labor, rethinking climate justice from the African feminist perspective. This study is about carbon payment, just a payment given to African governments so that they develop certain forests, and for that they are paid. But African families are not really benefiting from this. Even they are told not to pollute the area, not to fish, just these protected areas will not be available for them. So that is an abuse of the rights of African women. So for this reason, it is raised alternative mechanisms, not only payment from for the emissions that industrialized nations release, but another way of payment or compensation should be. So that is the stand of this writer. Not only just planting trees here in a land owned by somebody or in a place that is wanted for other purposes by these unpaid women. The next one is this land, intergenerational conversation about women, agriculture, and climate change in Zimbabwe. This is a conversation with a woman in Zimbabwe who owns a big A2 size land. They call it A1, A2 in Zimbabwe, and how she does agriculture. The difficult thing I saw here is that they buy seeds from shops. But in Ethiopia, we don't buy seeds from shops. We can sow what we harvested in the previous year. Even there is some fertilizer issue she raises. As a woman, as a widow, she faces different security problems. So it's an interesting dialogue. The next are big book reviews. The first one, Feminist African Philosophy, Women and the Politics of Difference. So this is one view but from a book reviewer called Shoran Ade Tutu Omotoso. Just feminist African philosophy, she criticized the writer of using just bombastic words and complicated philosophical ideas, but the idea of feminist African philosophy is really appreciated because just a philosophy of Africans has been male oriented, so feminist angle is sold. This is her take. So the next book review is Fashioning Post-Feminism, Spectacular Femininity and Transnational Culture. This one is about how Nigerian West African women are trying to use cosmetics and these wigs and human hair and so on, and how that affects their personalities and how they view fashion and blackness. So This is the review. This is the Pan-African book review, and we can also make it a book club by discussing, raising our ideas. I think it's an interesting point. Feminism, even in Ethiopia on TikTok, people were debating in Amharic. So this issue of even online digital issue is raised here. I hope you got some ideas. Please read the materials and see it online for free as a PDF. Thank you.